welcome back to the Global Narrative Podcast. Are you ready for another deep dive with me today?
Always.
Awesome. Today we're going to be tackling something that's both futuristic and surprisingly grounded at the same time.
Oh, what's that?
Universal Basic Income, or UBI, as all the cool kids are calling it.
UBI, yes.
I've got a whole stack of research here,
Ah.
articles, government documents, all about UBI.
Sounds like you've been doing your homework.
You know it. I always do my research for these deep dives.
That's what I like to hear.
And the big question we're exploring today is whether UBI is just some radical fringe idea,
Right.
or if it's actually becoming inevitable in our rapidly changing world.
It's definitely a hot topic these days.
Absolutely. Especially with all the advancements in AI, it's got everyone talking.
Yeah, you know what's fascinating?
What's that?
Is that UBI is definitely moving from the fringes to the mainstream.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, especially as we see the potential of AI to completely reshape the job market.
Well, let's start with that AI revolution then.
Okay, sure.
We've got this study here from OpenAI and the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And it's predicting that AI could disrupt 80%.
80%.
80% of the U.S. workforce.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's huge. Like, seriously, a lot.
Yeah, no kidding.
It makes you wonder what jobs will even be left in the future.
Right, like what are we all going to do?
I know. It's kind of scary to think about.
It is, yeah, it is a little bit.
But it's also exciting in a way, you know? Like, who knows what new opportunities might emerge.
True, there's always that.
But yeah, going back to the study, it's not just about robots replacing factory workers anymore.
Right.
This disruption, it goes way deeper than that.
Exactly.
Like even white-collar jobs.
Oh, wow.
Lawyers,
Okay.
software developers, even doctors.
Really? Even doctors?
Yeah, the study suggests that they could see like over half of their tasks being impacted by AI.
That's really interesting.
So like for someone listening right now,
Yeah.
imagine AI handling a huge chunk of your daily work.
Whoa.
What does that even mean for your job security?
Right.
Your career path, 5, 10 years down the line?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and that's where UBI comes in as like a potential solution.
Okay.
Or at
right.
least a safety net.
Right.
In this kind of uncertain future we're heading towards.
Yeah.
So the basic idea of UBI, just to, level set here.
Yeah.
It's regular,
Okay.
no strings attached, cash payments to every citizen,
Okay.
whether they have a job or not.
Interesting.
Pretty radical idea.
Yeah, it is when you think about it.
When you first hear it, you're like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
But then you realize that Alaska has already been doing a version of this for decades.
Oh, that's right.
With their permanent fund dividend, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like it's completely out there. It's actually been working
It's a real thing, yeah.
in a real place with real people
For a long time.
for a long time.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable about the Alaska model
Yeah.
is that even though the payments are relatively small,
Okay.
it's like around $1,000 to $2,000 per person annually,
Got it.
it's had some noticeable effects.
Oh. Like what?
I'm glad you asked. I was just about to get into that.
Okay, great. I'm all ears.
Well, for one, studies have shown that Alaskan birth rates have actually increased
Really?
since the program began.
That's interesting.
So it suggests that even a modest guaranteed income
Right.
can influence some pretty major life decisions.
Yeah, like starting a family.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder about all the other ripple effects, right?
Oh, totally. Like beyond just lifting people out of poverty.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a huge thing.
Of course, yeah.
But it could give people like the freedom to pursue education,
Okay.
start their own businesses,
Right.
or even just like take time to care for family,
Yeah.
knowing they have that basic financial security.
It's like a safety net that allows you to take risks.
Exactly. You said it perfectly.
But of course it's not a magic bullet, right?
Of course, man. There's no such thing as a magic bullet.
Yeah, UBI, it has its share of critics and concerns.
Right.
And even among economists, there are strong opinions on both sides.
Oh, I bet. So let's talk about those concerns then.
Okay, sure.
What are some of the big arguments against UBI that we should be considering?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms is the cost.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like critics question whether it's even remotely feasible
Right.
to fund a guaranteed income for everyone.
That's a valid concern.
It is, yeah.
And then there's the worry that people might just stop working altogether.
Oh, yeah, that's a common one.
Like, if you're getting money regardless, why bother working?
Right, why bother?
Exactly. So how do you address that concern?
Well, it's important to remember that UBI isn't designed to replace work altogether.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about providing a foundation so people can pursue work that's meaningful, even if it's not traditionally profitable.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about empowering people to contribute to society in different ways.
I love that. Like it frees people up to contribute in ways that maybe we haven't even thought of yet.
Exactly. Think about artists, caregivers, community organizers,
Right.
roles that are vital but often undervalued in our current economic system.
Absolutely. So true. But there's got to be another side to that coin, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, some people worry that UBI could lead to existing social programs being cut,
Oh, okay.
which could leave the most vulnerable even worse off.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah, it is.
Like any UBI implementation would have to be super carefully thought out
Absolutely.
and consider how it interacts with existing social safety nets.
Right. You don't want to create unintended consequences.
Exactly, especially for those who rely on those programs the most.
Exactly.
So it's like a balancing act.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory of UBI,
Uh-huh.
the potential impacts,
Right.
and the concerns,
Yeah.
but has this ever actually been tried in the real world?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Are there any examples we can look to?
There are actually quite a few real-world examples and experiments
Okay.
that can shed light on how UBI works in practice.
That's what I want to hear. Give me the juicy details.
All right. Well, one fascinating historical example
Okay.
is the Mincome experiment in Manitoba, Canada.
Oh, yeah, Mincome. I remember reading about that.
It ran from 1974 to 1979.
Okay.
Quite a while ago now.
Yeah, it was a while back, but didn't they find that people who received UBI were actually more likely to go back to school
Yeah, that's right.
or like start their own businesses?
Exactly.
It's almost like it sparked something entrepreneurial in them.
Uh-huh. It gave them the freedom to pursue their passions.
I love that. Do you have any like specific examples, any cool stories from that experiment?
Well, one participant used their UBI to start a small bakery.
A bakery. Oh,
I know, right?
That's awesome.
And it ended up becoming a beloved local spot.
Wow. So like their UBI actually helped them create something that benefited the whole community.
Exactly. It's a great example of how even a small cushion can empower people to take risks and pursue their passions.
And it's not just about the money, it's about the ripple effect.
The ripple effect, yeah.
It's inspiring to think about.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so we've got income, but weren't there some trials in Ontario too?
Oh, yes.
I feel like I remember reading about something like that.
Yeah, in Lindsay, Ontario,
Okay.
there was a pilot program
Uh-huh.
where local businesses were actually anticipating an economic boost.
Interesting. Why were they anticipating a boost?
Well, because they figured people would have more money to spend,
Makes sense?
right? So everyone was kind of excited about it.
Oh, wow.
But unfortunately, the program was cut short.
Oh, no. Why was it cut short?
Well, I think funding issues, political stuff, you know how it goes.
Yeah, sadly I do.
So we didn't get to see the full effects.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is because those real-world examples are so valuable for understanding how UBI might play out on a larger scale.
Totally. So it's like we have these glimpses of what's possible,
Right.
but we need more data, more research
Exactly.
to really know what would happen if we implemented UBI nationwide.
Absolutely.
But okay, let's be realistic for a second.
Okay.
Any nationwide UBI program would be incredibly expensive.
It would, yeah.
Like, where would all that money even come from?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is, it is.
But there are actually a number of proposed funding models out there.
Okay, well, tell me more.
Well, one that got a lot of attention was Andrew Yang's Freedom Dividend during his 2020 U.S. presidential campaign.
Oh, yeah, Young. He was a big UBI advocate.
He was, yeah, a big proponent.
He proposed giving every American adult $1,000 a month, no strings attached.
Yeah, that was his platform.
That's a bold idea.
It was.
How did he plan to pay for it, though?
His plan was pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
It relied on a mix of things,
Like what?
like a value-added tax, or VAT,
Okay.
a carbon tax,
Uh-huh.
and adjustments to existing social programs.
So basically a complete overhaul of the tax system.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's interesting.
It definitely played people talking about whether funding something like this was even remotely possible.
Yeah, it definitely sparked a lot of debate.
It did, yeah.
So we've got VATs, carbon taxes. Are there any other ideas out there, maybe something a little bit more, outside the box?
Well, closer to home, there's a report by UBI Works
Okay.
that outlines a potential funding plan for a Canadian UBI program.
A Canadian UBI program. Cool. What's their approach?
What's interesting about this one is that it specifically aims to avoid raising taxes for most Canadians.
Really? How do they do that?
Anyone making under $100,000 a year wouldn't see a tax increase.
Wow, that's ambitious. Where's the money coming from then?
They propose a mix of adjustments to the tax code,
Like what kind of adjustments?
including closing corporate tax loopholes
Okay.
and implementing a financial transaction tax.
Interesting.
So the idea is to shift the burden to those who can most afford it.
I see. So they're trying to make it more equitable
Exactly.
and address those concerns about UBI being too costly
Right.
or leading to higher taxes for the average person.
Exactly.
That's a really smart approach.
It is, yeah.
But I gotta ask, are there any truly radical ideas out there?
Like, really out there?
Yeah, like something that completely reimagines how we think about funding something like UBI.
Well, there is one concept that's been gaining some traction.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
It's called the data dividend.
The data dividend. Okay, you've officially piqued my interest.
All right, so think about all the data we generate online every single day.
Oh yeah, tons of it.
Our searches, our social media activity, our online purchases.
It's kind of scary how much data we generate.
It is, and this data is incredibly valuable to tech companies.
Oh yeah, they're making a fortune off of it.
They are, and the argument is that we, as citizens, should be compensated for it.
So you're saying our online activity,
Yeah.
like our digital footprint,
Uh-huh.
has intrinsic value that we're not currently being compensated for?
Precisely. It's almost like a form of digital labor.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's like we're unknowingly performing this labor for these tech giants.
And they're reaping all the rewards.
Yeah, pretty much.
So the data dividend proposes that we should have ownership of our data
Right.
and receive a share of the profits generated from it.
That's the idea.
That's a mind-blowing concept.
It is, yeah.
But how would we even begin to determine the value of our data?
That's a good question.
And like, who would collect and distribute this data dividend?
Right. Those are all valid questions.
Yeah, there are a lot of logistical challenges.
There are, for sure.
But if we could figure it out,
Yeah.
it seems like the data dividend could be a game changer.
It could be, yeah.
In terms of funding UBI and creating a more equitable digital economy,
Absolutely.
it really makes you think about the potential of our data
It does, yeah.
and how we might leverage it in the future.
Yeah. It's a powerful concept.
But we'll have to dive deeper into that another time.
Yeah, we could do a whole deep dive just on the data dividend.
Totally. But for now, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay, sure.
And explore some of the other real-world UBI experiments that have been conducted around the globe.
Great idea. There are a few in particular that offer some truly fascinating insights
Oh? Like what?
into the social and psychological impacts of UBI.
That's what I'm talking about. Beyond just the economic effects.
Exactly.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay, so we've talked about Alaska, Mincom, that Lindsay trial.
Uh-huh.
It seems like there's a pretty long history of experimenting with UBI in different forms.
Yeah, definitely. Like going way back.
And it's interesting to see how those experiments have shaped the conversation around UBI over time.
For sure, it's been evolving.
It feels like the rise of AI and automation has really pushed UBI into the spotlight.
Yeah, definitely. It's become much more relevant.
Like, it's almost as if technology is forcing us
Yeah.
to confront these fundamental questions about work
Uh-huh.
and the role of government in supporting its citizens.
Totally. The world is changing and we need to adapt.
Exactly. So speaking of, like, alternative solutions,
Okay.
you mentioned that UBI has actually been around for centuries.
Yeah, in various forms, it's not a new idea.
So are there, like, any historical figures that were surprisingly early advocates of this idea?
Well, one surprising advocate was Milton Friedman.
Wait, really? Milton Friedman,
Yeah,
the, like, famous economist.
the one and only.
I always thought conservatives were generally against government handouts.
It's a common assumption, but Friedman was a bit of a maverick.
So he actually supported UBI.
Well, he supported a form of UBI called a negative income tax.
Negative income tax, okay, I've heard that term thrown around.
It was his solution to combating poverty.
Interesting. So how would that work?
It's similar to UBI in that it provides a guaranteed minimum income,
Okay.
but the amount of the payment decreases as the recipient's income increases.
It's like a sliding scale.
Exactly, ensuring that those with the lowest incomes receive the most support,
Makes sense.
but also encouraging people to work and increase their earnings.
So it's not just a free handout. It's designed to incentivize people to contribute.
Exactly, Friedman saw it as a more efficient and less bureaucratic alternative to traditional welfare programs.
Interesting. So he was looking for a way to streamline the social safety net?
He was all about individual autonomy and choice.
I see. So give people the support they need, but also the freedom to make their own decisions.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these ideas have persisted and evolved over time, even crossing ideological lines.
Yeah, it speaks to the enduring challenge of poverty and inequality.
And the search for solutions that balance individual responsibility with societal support.
Right. Finding that sweet spot is always the challenge.
It is. So we've talked about those funding models,
Uh-huh.
like Andrew Yang's Freedom Dividend and the UBI Works report for Canada.
Yeah, those were some interesting proposals.
But you mentioned this intriguing concept of a data dividend earlier.
Oh, yeah, the data dividend?
Yeah, that one really caught my attention.
It's a fascinating idea.
Could you kind of elaborate on how that might actually work as a funding source for UBI?
Sure, so the data dividend recognizes the value of the data we generate online.
Okay.
Every time we search, shop, or interact on social media,
Uh-huh.
we're creating valuable data that companies use for profit.
Yeah, it's true. Our data is like a gold mine for these companies.
It is, and the argument is that we, as citizens, should have ownership of that data.
Okay, so like we should have a say in how it's used.
Exactly, and we should receive a share of the profits generated from it.
So you're saying our online activity, our digital footprint, actually has intrinsic value that we're not currently being compensated for.
Precisely. It's a form of digital labor.
Wow, I never thought of it that way before.
It's like we're unknowingly working for these tech giants every time we go online.
And they're reaping all the benefits.
Pretty much, yeah.
So the data dividend proposes that we should be getting a cut of those profits.
Exactly.
It's a bold idea, but how would we even begin to determine the value of our data?
That's a great question, and it's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, it seems super complicated.
It would require a lot of collaboration between governments, tech companies, and privacy advocates.
To figure out how to measure it, collect it, and distribute it fairly.
Exactly. Transparency and fairness would be key.
But if we could figure out the logistics, it seems like the data dividends could be a real game changer.
It has the potential to revolutionize how we think about data ownership and digital equity.
It's exciting to think about the possibility.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so far our discussion has focused mainly on the economic implications of UBI.
Right, the money side of things.
The potential for job displacement, funding models, all of that.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts.
But what about the social and psychological impacts?
Oh, that's a whole other layer.
Like what happens when people have the security of a guaranteed income?
It's an interesting question.
How does it affect their well-being, their relationships, their outlook on life?
Well, one of the most compelling arguments in favor of UBI is that it could significantly reduce stress and anxiety.
That makes sense.
It frees people up to focus on personal growth and well-being.
Yeah, if you're constantly worried about making rent or putting food on the table,
Right.
it's hard to invest in your education, pursue your passions, or even just take care of your mental and physical health.
Exactly. UBI could provide a sense of security and stability.
Like a foundation to build upon.
Exactly. It allows people to escape the constant grind of survival mode.
And focus on living a more fulfilling life.
Right. It's about more than just surviving. It's about thriving.
I love that. And that could lead to all sorts of positive ripple effects, right?
Potentially, though.
Increased entrepreneurship, a more educated workforce, a healthier population.
It's a fascinating idea to consider.
It is, but are there like any studies or real-world examples that support these claims?
There are, actually. Remember the Mincome experiment we talked about earlier?
Oh yeah, the one in Canada.
Researchers didn't just track economic outcomes.
Okay.
They also studied the social and psychological impacts on the participants.
And what did they find?
Well, they found that UBI recipients reported lower levels of stress and anxiety, improved mental health, and were more likely to seek preventative health care.
So they were taking better care of themselves overall.
It seems so.
Wow, that's pretty significant.
It is, yeah.
It suggests that UBI could have a profound impact on both individual well-being and public health.
Right. Healthy individuals contribute to a healthier society.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just individuals, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some researchers believe that UBI could strengthen social bonds,
Interesting.
reduce crime rates, and foster a more compassionate and engaged citizenry.
It's fascinating to think about how those social dynamics might shift.
It is. It's like UBI could potentially reshape not just our economy, but our social fabric as well.
The way we interact with each other, our sense of community.
It's a big idea with potentially huge implications.
It is, yeah.
So, speaking of exploring thoughtfully,
Okay.
what are some other real-world UBI experiments that provide valuable insights into this social and psychological dimension?
There have been numerous pilot programs and studies conducted around the world.
Give me some examples. I'm eager to learn more.
Well, one notable example is the Give Directly project in Kenya.
Give directly, okay.
They provide unconditional cash transfers to residents in rural villages.
Interesting. I've heard about that project.
It's been running for a while now.
So what have they learned about the impacts of these cash transfers on the recipients' lives?
The findings have been pretty remarkable, actually.
Okay, tell me more.
The cash transfers have led to significant improvements in economic well-being.
Like what specifically?
Well, recipients are investing in businesses, livestock, and education.
So they're using the money to build a better future for themselves and their families?
Exactly. But what's particularly interesting is the impact on social dynamics and community life.
Oh, that's what I was getting at. So it's not just about the money itself,
Right.
but how that financial security ripples out
Uh-huh.
and affects people's relationships and their sense of belonging within the community.
Precisely. It's about more than just individual gain.
Okay, so what have they observed in those areas?
Well, the Give Directly project has shown that cash transfers can lead to increased trust and cooperation among community members.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yes, yeah.
So, like, People are more willing to help each other out, work together,
It seems so, yeah.
because they feel more secure and supported themselves.
Exactly, and recipients have reported feeling more empowered and valued.
That's amazing. It's like it creates a more positive and supportive environment for everyone.
It's about creating a virtuous cycle.
Exactly.
And there's been a noticeable decrease in conflict and violence.
Wow. So UBI could potentially contribute to a more peaceful society.
It's a fascinating possibility.
It is. These examples paint a pretty optimistic picture of the potential of UBI.
They do, yeah.
But let's be real, there must be some downsides or challenges.
There are always two sides to every coin.
Yeah, like what are some of the potential negative consequences of implementing UBI on a larger scale?
That's a crucial question to consider.
It feels like we're almost on the verge of like a massive societal shift, you know?
It does, doesn't it?
With AI advancing so fast
At an unprecedented rate.
and the whole nature of work being redefined,
Totally.
UBI suddenly seems less like a utopian dream
Right.
and more like kind of like a practical necessity.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a more serious topic of conversation.
For sure. Okay, so let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay, I like it.
What are some of the potential downsides of implementing UBI?
All right, challenge accepted.
We've touched on the costs already
Uh-huh.
and the concern about, disincentivizing work.
The whole why bother working if you're getting paid anyway argument.
Exactly. But are there other risks we need to consider?
Well, one concern is the potential for inflation.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
If everyone suddenly has more money to spend,
Yeah.
it could drive up prices for goods and services.
Right, classic supply and demand.
Exactly. And that could erode the purchasing power of that guaranteed income.
It's like giving everyone a raise,
Yeah,
but then everything at the grocery store costs more.
right.
So no one's actually better off.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Okay, so inflation's a risk. What else?
Another concern is the potential for political manipulation.
Ooh, that's a scary thought.
It is a bit, yeah.
Like how so?
Well, a UBI program would give the government tremendous power over people's lives.
That's true.
And there's always a risk that it could be used for partisan purposes.
Yeah, politicians could dangle the promise of higher UBI payments to win votes.
Exactly.
Or even threaten to cut benefits to punish their opponents.
It's a slippery slope.
It is. Okay, so inflation, political manipulation, anything else?
Well, there's always the question of unintended consequences.
Oh yeah, the unknown.
We simply don't know how UBI would affect society in the long term.
True.
It could lead to unforeseen social or economic shifts.
Right, like a ripple effect that we can't even predict.
It's like conducting a massive social experiment with unpredictable outcomes.
Yeah, it's both exciting and a little bit terrifying.
Exactly. But I guess that's the nature of progress, isn't it?
I suppose so. You got to take some risks to move forward.
We have to be willing to adapt to changing circumstances.
And it's not like we're starting from scratch.
That's true.
We have decades of research and real-world examples to draw on.
We've got Mincome, the Lindsay trial, Alaska's permanent fund dividend.
Yeah, those are great examples.
And there are even projects in Kenya and other countries that are providing valuable insights.
So it's not just theory. We have actual data to inform our decisions.
Exactly. But it's also important to acknowledge that there have been some setbacks along the way.
Oh yeah, like what? Have there been any notable failures?
Well, Finland's basic income experiment, which ran from 2017 to 2018,
Okay.
is often cited as a cautionary tale.
Really? What happened there?
Well, it didn't result in any catastrophic outcomes,
Okay, that's good.
but it also failed to produce the significant improvements in employment that many had hoped for.
So even with good intentions, UBI isn't a guaranteed fix-all solution.
Exactly.
It's a complex policy with nuanced effects that vary depending on the context.
Right. What works in one country or region might not work in another.
It seems like the key takeaway here is that UBI is not a silver bullet.
Agreed.
It's a powerful tool with potential, but it requires careful planning and consideration.
And a willingness to adapt and learn from both successes and failures.
Well said. So where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Is UBI inevitable? Or will it just remain a theoretical concept?
It's hard to say for sure, but the conversation is definitely gaining momentum.
It does feel like it's becoming more mainstream.
As technology continues to disrupt the workforce,
Yeah.
and as economic inequality becomes more pronounced,
Right.
the pressure to find solutions like UBI will only intensify.
And it's a conversation that each of us needs to be a part of.
Absolutely. We need to educate ourselves, engage with different perspectives, and form our own informed opinions.
Because ultimately, the decision of whether or not to implement UBI is a societal one.
It's a decision that will shape the future of work and the way we live our lives.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have, yeah. It's been a great conversation.
We've explored the history of UBI, the potential benefits and challenges, the funding models, the psychological impacts, the real-world experiments.
It's a complex issue with many facets.
It is, but I hope this has inspired our listeners to keep learning and exploring.
Me too. It's a topic that deserves our attention.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right. The more we talk about it, the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions.
So keep researching, keep asking questions, keep the conversation going.
And don't forget to follow the Global Narratives podcast on social media for more deep dives into the issues that matter most.
That's right. And be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes
We've got some exciting guests and topics coming up,
that you won't want to miss.
so stay tuned.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.